Good Monday morning! Today I would like to talk a little bit about how to tackle a programming problem before we start working on it. I am your host MPJ and you are watching Fun Function. So last week I asked you to tweet me any question that you would like me to talk about, and Colin Bellino asked, how are you feeling today? And that's so nice of you to ask, Colin. I'm feeling a lot better. The last few months has been a bit rough because I've been moving cities, moving to Stockholm, and while that is great in general, it's been a lot of stress, especially the fact that I've been moving my studio, so I've basically been lacking a place to work, which like just torpedoes every routine you have. But this week I've been signed the contract for a new studio space. We're moving into that space next week, but for you that's this week. And we're going to hopefully start our the first stream this week. Stay tuned for that. Make sure that you subscribe on twitch.tv/funfunfunction to get notified when that happens. I feel really great about what spring will offer for the channel, and we have some great things coming up, and it's gotta be awesome. In case you're wondering, by the way, what my shirt says, it's like, if Brittany made it through 2007, you can make it through today. Jojo from South Africa asks, how do you deal with procrastination? Oh, procrastination, am I an expert on this? To a person observing my life from a little distance, like people watching the YouTube channel, like that are peripherally aware of my career, I might seem like a pretty productive person. I get out new episodes every week for like several years. It's been a little spotty now during the winter, but that will pick up again. And I don't know, I seem like a relatively functioning person. But what is not obvious and visible is that I tend to not get anything done. With the episodes, for instance, it's extremely common for me to just do almost nothing during the week. Like, not for lack of trying. I try to sit down and make an episode, but I just don't do it. And I either get distracted or just stare at the problem, the blank page that is the possible episode, or I don't know, I just don't get it done for various reasons. I end up doing it like with blazing speed on Sunday afternoon. And this is pretty much the only way I get things done. I construct these boxes with wolves in them. For instance, I have this YouTube channel is a box with a wolf in it. Like every Monday, I have this huge expectation on me to release an episode, and it becomes almost unthinkable not to release an episode. It makes it very easy to adhere to that contract when you know that a lot of people are expecting you to make an episode. You really want to fulfill that. It's like a box with a wolf. Another example is like I'm going to have a CrossFit session tomorrow where I've booked like time with a personal trainer, and that person like expects me to show up there, and that will make me show up, and then I exercise. It's another box with a wolf. I have very little self-discipline and very little ability to make myself do something, but I'm pretty good at constructing these boxes that exploit my sense of duty or obligation to get things done. I tend to function best when I can do hyper-focusation, like rather long blocks of time where I just like churn into a problem. I'm very, very, very bad at multitasking. Like if I have a work day where I kind of like use Slack or any kind of messenger in any way, that tends to just completely interrupt my workflow, and I get nothing done. Whenever I try to have a day where I try to get many things done, I get absolutely nothing done. I just get distracted, and none of the things that I intended to do gets done. So I have, like, I tend to be, like, the only reason why my life functions at all is because I'm reasonably good at finding, like, a single thing for every day that kind of is useful, or at least one every week. So, for instance, like making an episode every week, I get almost nothing done, but I get that thing done, and that has a high impact, and that functions as a core of my life. And to get myself to focus, then I tend to wanna block off these time boxes. I'm a big believer in time boxing, and I recently bought this thing. It's a time timer. Can you see it? Will it? If I put it there, will it focus? Yeah. It's this awesome little thing that it's a visual time timer. Stop focusing on my face. And as you see, like, it shows you visually how much time is left, which is really great. So, and it's pretty big, as you see, and you can put it like in your field of view. I put it like right next to my computer screen, so I clearly see like how much time I have left to focus. It provides like this visual cue, and on the back I can also turn on and off the audio alarm that bleeps at the end of the session, which is really great because I often want a audio alarm, but it's if I'm sitting in a library or a coffee shop, I wanna turn that off. So this is a great little device, and it's also good to. I've tried using my phone as a timer because that seems like the obvious thing to use, but it just really doesn't work because the phone has so many other things in it that I tend to get caught up in. Like, just the fact that I view the phone makes me wanna check Instagram, and the moment I pick up the fucking phone to turn off the alarm once it rings, then immediately there's some notification that sucks me in. And the nice thing with this is that it creates this Pavlovian response. Like, when I turn this thing, that is connected to hyperfocus, and only hyperfocus. And I try to do this in 1 hour sessions. This is kind of inspired by the Pomodoro technique, but the Pomodoro technique is 25-minute sessions, which is a good. I think it's good for many people, but I have a hard time getting back into the thing. So for me, it's better to just like focus for an hour. It's also like just a nice unit, and this also happens to be an hourly unit, and it also happens to be the quick access thing on iPhone that if you force touch the do not disturb icon on iOS, you can quickly do a do not disturb for 1 hour. So it's like 1 hour, kind of like it's a nice unit to keep in mind, and you probably shouldn't work for sitting still for more than an hour anyway, so it's kind of like also a nice upper limit. Good point to take a break. A precondition of hyperfocus is to, for me at least, to know why I am doing something. I think it's a subtle thing with procrastination, is that I think that a lot of people don't understand that it's there to protect you. The body tries to conserve energy, and it constantly challenges you to like, is this really like a good way to spend your time? Because there's all kinds of pressure on us to do different things. Like, there's like the world wants us to do more things than we have time and energy to do. So that's what the feeling of boredom or being obstinate or just don't want to do something, that's what that's there to protect us from. So that is why it's important to, like, if something is, you need to do something, I find that it helps a lot to sit down and define a clear why behind what I'm doing. that tends to I think that it's called the locus of control in your brain that is activated. Don't know if that's a real thing or behavioral psychology mental model of thinking about it, but I definitely feel a sense of control and agency once I actually understand why I'm doing something. Some of you might be thinking, wow, he's really procrastinating on talking about today's actual subject that I clicked this video to learn about. And you're right, but it does tie into this question a little bit. Either way, let's have a look at the Twitter question. Matthias Sandberg asks, what's your favorite ways to tackle a problem/task before you start working on it? The first thing that I like to do is to understand the problem. And what I mean by that is that I want to understand the background and the intent behind the task that we're supposed to do. So by background, I mean like understanding the whole why this thing has ended up in your team's backlog and why it's ended up on your table. And this is important to ask, both for yourself, for your own motivation, as we talked about earlier, but it's also important for the organization, because if you don't understand the background, you might end up implementing the wrong thing. So it's important just to not just accept the task immediately. It's important for you to understand the holistics of it. So it's great if you start out with a kind of curious skepticism and asking yourself, is this really necessary? Is this necessary? And not as a rhetorical question to lazily get this thing off your table or dismiss it, but as with a sense of curiosity. Because if you don't, you might either end up in the situation where you're kind of end up in this kind of passive-aggressive weird stance where you're grudgingly implementing something and you don't really know why. Even though it might be a really good business requirement and might have some really solid background of why this is. And if you understand what that is and why that is, you can confidently say to yourself, no, this is actually a very sensible thing for us to do. But if you don't understand it and you just start implementing it anyway, you might end up feeling really bad about what you're doing because you don't understand how you connect in things. And it's very important for humans to understand how their actions connect to the greater whole. It's been proven in studies in this branch of psychology called Googling self-determination theory. It's also very important to ask yourself the question why, because sometimes things end up on the backlog for really bad reasons. One example that I've encountered many times is because some senior management sneezed, basically. They just offhandedly said in some meeting that, oh, this would be cool. And then that just starts snowballing through the organization into a feature, or sometimes in large organization, even a fucking team. And the senior manager was not, that was not really their intent. So if you go back, they were like, what? No, that was just an idea I had. I didn't actually order you to implement it. That's probably something that you become more aware of as you get those positions in large organizations, that you have to be very careful about what you say because it has huge ripple effects in the organization. But I think it's very important to not be a complete yes person. You should be enthusiastic and curious, but you should also make sure that you always understand why a task is being built. Once we know the background, we can move back and think about what's the intent behind this task. What is it that actually needs doing? Because the task might be worded in a certain way. For instance, implement this menu. Bad example, something imagine something rather elaborate. But you might discover that the intent of this added extra menu, like the settings menu or something, that might be to offer the user to turn off, I don't know, auto-playing videos in their feed of things. And then it might be better to just add a little like extra context action on the videos to allow the user to do that, instead of implementing this rather elaborate thing in the interface. And this is important because that will make you so much more of an efficient software engineer if you can go back to the stakeholders and like the designer or the product owner and say that, yeah, you've asked me to implement this thing, and the way it's worded, it's going to take about like 50 hours. But looking back to your intent, if I understand it correctly and you reiterate it, then I think that I can implement like this thing in 2 hours, which achieves your intent, but at a much cheaper cost to the team and us as a development organization. What do you think? If you are an engineer that can do that and argue for that and have a discussion around that, that makes you into an engineer that is effectively an order of magnitude more efficient than an engineer that just simply does what they're told all the time. I don't want to present like some kind of utopian dream here, like sometimes you won't be able to convince your stakeholders about like the much simpler solutions, but a lot of times you are, and that will make a huge impact on the organization and will make you much better. All right, so now we've understood the task. We have the background of the task, and we have the intent of the task, and we have formulated something that of what actually needs doing. The next step here is talking to people, talking to lots and lots and lots of people. But might not necessarily be lots, but it's often a lot. This is something that a lot of people that get into software development gets a little bit surprised about when they start actually working in the field, that how much talking it is. If you don't like talking, you are not gonna like software development. I'm sorry. The first people that you're going to talk to are probably stakeholders. The product owner will probably have an okay view of the stakeholders, but as you start getting into the nitty-gritty of what needs to be done, you probably will need to have a direct dialogue with the people that are actually going to use the feature. And also like other teams that might be affected, and yeah, this varies like wildly from feature to feature and task to task, but you tend to you get a lot more done if you understand like the ramification of your task on other parts of the organization. After you talk to some stakeholders and gotten a bit more meat in your mind about like what it is that needs to be doing, you talk to other devs. And there might be devs that are knowledgeable in the code base that you will be working. They're gonna be just like your average colleague, or if you're new, like your new team members, to get a sense of the implications of what is being implemented, and discussing a little bit on like the best approach of implementing it in the system, because people that have a lot of knowledge about the code base are going to give you good insights about it, and probably going to give you a little bit of pushback because the way that you're thinking, like your initial thought about it implemented, is probably going to be like not quite in sync with the system. It might be like, oh, okay, yeah, if we do this, you have to refactor this entire module, blah, or something like that is expensive, and they can probably in turn provide you with some better way of doing it. They might be pushing for a bad way of doing it that is comfortable for the system, so to speak, like because change in a software system is risky, so software software developers naturally tend to like push back on change as much as possible in order to reduce defects. But I mean, if we completely stop change, then we're not introducing any changes or improvements at all. So it's a trade-off. You will also have to talk to other devs in order to just know how the hell to do things. Like finding out what endpoints to use, if you're working in like a new module of the system, you might have to figure out how to build that thing and deploy that thing and la 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 la. And you will find that you are frustrated at why is this not covered in docs, and why is this thing not automated completely? Why do I need to talk to a human here? And to some extent, that frustration is correct. I mean, you can always improve deployment things by dockerizing things, and you can write better documentation for endpoints and stuff like that. But I find that the whole the well-documented system where every endpoint always works and stuff that's just a dream. I've never seen it. It's a Loch Ness thing. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I just have not ever seen it. In reality, things are flexible. Things move around, and the only people that have a fresh notion of what is going on is the people that have done it. And sometimes they have synced that state in their head out into a document or like some kind of test-driven suite or whatever. But quite often, a lot of the knowledge about a software project is going to be in the people. And that's the way systems work with humans. I mean, that goes for any kind of system, even a building. If you have a building and no person works on it, no person repairs it, no person fixes the pipes or unclogs the electricity. I don't know what is involved in my house, but my point is that if you leave the house untouched by humans for a rather short period of time, just a few years, it will completely break down. And software development projects, and especially things that are deployed on servers, which is where a lot of things go wrong all the time, it's almost it's more like gardening than anything. And it's important to recognize the human element of it. It's a living, pulsating being, and you have to talk to people in order to figure out where we change things. So you probably have noticed here that we have only talked about defining the problem here. We have not written any code yet. We have talked about how we understanding the background of the problem, understanding the intent of the solution, and then researching the nitty-gritty of how something should be made, and also discussing with other parties of modifying this solution. And defining the problem, I would say, is one of the absolutely top skills of a software developer. That is the so core, and it's only the software developer that can do it. Product owner cannot do it, the agile coach cannot do it, the customer cannot do it, because it requires this interaction and knowing systems well, and researching a lot of things, both on the product side and on the technical side. And the most important aspect of all of this, the most important function that a software developer has, is to augment the problem into a worse problem. And what I mean by that is that a software developer is the person that thinks of the happy path. So every solution has a happy path, right? It's when everything goes right, the user writes the correct input, and the user has a great internet connection, and the credit card payment goes through correctly, and now we can just say, oh, order has been charged and sent. Great. But reality doesn't work like that. Reality always tries to like destroy everything and fail. The universe is not there to make us happy. It's there to make us sad. And we try to design systems which makes humans not sad by working and doing things. That's what we do as software developers. And therefore, as software developers, we have to think about the sad path, the edge cases, and we have to dream up all the ways that the universe can mess this up. So we have to think about, what if the network goes down? What if this system returns an error? What if this system returns an error? What if the user has a playlist of 10,000 songs? What if there is an artist on the service that adds an album with 2,000 songs? And the worst thing with this is that you can invent an infinite list of those things. So you also have to know like when to stop and how to prioritize and get a sense of like which ones are actually likely to happen or not. And this can sometimes require a bit of a data mining. At a music company I worked at, I was involved in optimizing scroll performance for lists of song items. And the question arose like during the work, like how many songs should we like optimize for? Like, because we discovered that our efforts, like if we optimized the scrolling for a playlist that was 10,000 songs long, that meant like the way we like our loading strategies effectively made the case for the short playlists worse. And it was very hard to devise an algorithm that worked for both cases. Like it was almost like a whack-a-mole. The more we made it better for the long case, the worse it became for the short case. So the need arose to know like what does a user actually look like? What is the archetype? So that required like actually going into like the data set and monitoring usage to see like how many songs were people actually adding to the playlist, and then we optimized for like the 98% of users that I don't remember how many songs it was, and I probably can't tell because it's secret company data. But the point was that we figured out what the almost all users look like and optimized for that instead of spending hogatons of time on optimizing for an edge case that was super rare and that also made the experience worse for the users that were actually in the normal range. When you get a task, it's often described in very simple terms. It's like the user is supposed to add this thing to this thing, and it's fine. But there's almost always a lot of intricacies to a problem. Like the user might want to add it in this way, and what happens if the user does this or this. Like it's not necessarily things that go wrong. It's not sad path things. It's just like all the different nuances of the problem. Like, well, like implementing this feature now, what happens when it interacts with this feature? That kind of stuff. And all those things are like a case. Like it's a test case, basically. And this is why a lot of developers, when they start writing unit tests or doing TDD, is that they are just overwhelmed with, oh my God, there's so much test code for, I wrote like these 3 lines of code and I'm up to 15 unit tests. And this is because, like, not entirely, but to a large degree, I find that when I write test code, I just think about more things that can go wrong and more intricacies of the code, and I just test for them. When you just write code like off the yeah, I just write the code, you tend to only think about the happy path, you tend to not think about the sad path, and you don't tend to not think about the edge path. Or like you do, but not at all to the extent you do when you're sitting there dreaming up test cases for your code. And the thing is, like, it's very important to be aware that programming languages are designed to be extremely expressive. Even if you have like this tiny piece of code, like just I don't know, 10 lines long, and you try to describe what that code does in English, and also try to describe each case from the start, then you end up with like probably several pages worth of English. It's programming languages are so terse and so expressive, and that's the way they're designed. And it's important to be aware of that power. You can contain so much logic in a little ball, and that's why unit testing is so important to be aware of that you're adding a lot of complexity to the system. Because if you're not aware of this, you might be adding like just a few lines of code somewhere, and if you don't have automated tests, or at least think about what the test cases are that you're introducing, there might be manual too, you might be introducing, like for every case you're introducing, this one thing that can go wrong. And so whenever somebody is changing something in this thing, let's say that it's like 20 things they have to check that cannot go wrong. If you don't have an automated test suite for that, you're introducing like so much brittleness into your system that it just makes the system bad. Change batteries there. Did you know? But anyway, at some point we are going to start coding. And as much as I've talked about like this research planning phase, and it's also important to get going. Prior to recording this episode, I brainstormed this a little bit with Isa. Her Twitter is in the episode description, and she said like this wonderful little soundbite: refinement is better than overthinking. Which makes sense, but I would like to extend it to that refinement is better than upfront thinking. What we're trying to get at there is that it's important to not try to write the best code immediately. For instance, like I tend to, when there's an API involved, I always try to just create a throwaway prototype in order to learn just the API endpoints and just get a sense of what the API looks like. And then I just dump that code out, just copy it to like some notepad or something where I can kind of keep it as a reference-ish, but I don't use that code. Instead, I start TDDing. I start like writing out the simplest case, simplest happy path, and then I start building out from like error cases and edge cases, and getting into it that way, and start like with a super naive solution, which then becomes gradually less naive. And refactoring is something that I push to as late as possible, because that writing nice code that is readable or like fast code, that takes a long time, and it's very bad to do it up front because you're probably going to end up improving readability and speed of code that you're just going to be throwing away because it was wrong. So it's better to just like iterate and refine, and until you have like code that works on all accounts, has all the test cases running and green, then you start thinking about performance, then you start thinking about readability, which is important before you do the pull request, but don't do it up front. That's just a distraction. I really want to make a push for TDD, test-driven development here, because it has made me such a better developer when it comes to these things. It works really well for me because for me it's a distraction buster. It keeps me focused on functionality and making sure that the code works, because each test case means that something works. It's like a green, 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 red, green, red, green, red, green thing, where the tests break and then you implement it and then they go green, and you may know that you're making progress on actual functionality. And otherwise I tend to get caught up in refactoring and code styling and API design and stuff like that, which isn't really adding end user value. Don't get me wrong, it's important, but unless you have a working foundation, it's just speed and readability it's just a waste of time. Readability and speed are important, but they must rest on a solid foundation of function, and that's what we verify with unit tests. TDD is also nice because it gives me a tangible feeling of progress. Like as tests grow, I know that I am making progress towards functionality. It just feels great. It gives like this constant motivation and keeps me from, it gives you like these little hits of dopamine each time, and it's very, very nice. Finally, unit test removes the illusion of the happy path, because there's so many times where I have, in a more junior version of me, just implemented the happy path and deployed it and sent it away to like the product owner or whatever the customer was, and they immediately found problems with it. And I was just so frustrated with myself for like, why didn't I think of that? Yeah, because you didn't think. You didn't think of anything but the happy path. You just wanted to complete the task. And the problem is that if you just think about the happy path and don't think about the sad path or the edge path, you have not really completed the task. That's my thoughts on that. In this, what felt like a very long episode. I hope that you found it useful and that you faced it through to the end. If you have questions about my problem-solving process, please post them as a comment down below, or also feel very welcome to share how you solve problems yourself. That is like super interesting to me. And that is it. You have just watched an episode of Fun Function. I release these every Monday morning, 0800 GMT. But you will forget that, so you can click here to subscribe, or if you're not quite ready to do that, you can check out another episode right now by clicking there. I am MPJ. Until next Monday morning, stay curious.